Welcome back, folks. This is Shane. In today's video, I'm going to talk about which camera equipment I'll be taking overseas and why, and what its purpose will be. And then I'm going to ask for some help deciding on whether or not I'm actually making the right decision or not. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back, folks. This is Shane. So I'm going to be producing some content while I'm overseas, but I'm also just looking for an everyday carry. I think, at least in my mind, I have my everyday carry camera sorted out already, and it's something I've already used overseas, so I know it's going to be great. I'm actually going over to Hawaii for about 10 days coming up, and I can't wait. It's such a beautiful place, and last time I went, I took my GH5 Mark II, and I also had an original S5, and both cameras did a pretty solid job. The GH5 Mark II was kind of like my everyday carry camera. Even though I could have just taken the S5, I chose to shoot Micro Four Thirds as a primary camera. Micro Four Thirds has now come a long way. We've got the G9 Mark II and the GH7, both of which I have on the table here. So I'm a little undecided on what to take, but I think I'm going to try and map this out as we go here and talk about what I plan on bringing and why. The everyday camera will be a separate camera from the content creation camera. Now, some might argue it's better to take cameras of the same lens mount rather than two completely different systems, but I have a feeling that this particular second system, if I choose to shoot Micro Four Thirds, might make the most sense, and we'll talk about that coming right up. But anyway, let us know in the comments section what you prefer to shoot with if you go away on a trip anywhere. It doesn't have to be anywhere fancy. Just if you take a camera with you as an everyday camera, what is it that you choose to shoot with? And or if you're making content somewhere, what's your camera of choice? Let's talk about my everyday run and gun camera, starting with the S9. So there's a few reasons why I love this. I got this in June at the Lumix Global Summit, and I liked it that much that I ended up trading in my Sony FX30 and getting a second one. And since getting the second one, there was a firmware update that gave you unlimited recording. And I use these all the time in the studio, paired with my S5 Mark IIX, and they don't overheat for 4K 422 10-bit. You can just let them run all day. They've got awesome in-body image stabilization. They're small and light, but they have hybrid zoom. So if I pair this camera with the 20 to 60mm kit lens, I can punch so far in using hybrid zoom. It's awesome. So if you're someone who likes to shoot, say, in 4K, we get a 6K sensor. It digitally crops in just by turning the zoom ring. It's a really powerful feature. That's one of the reasons why this is my primary run and gun or everyday sort of travel camera. While I originally planned on taking two of these, I definitely want a second camera with active cooling, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. The second option I have as an everyday carry is the Lumix G9 Mark II, and this has some advantages over the S9. The S9 has some advantages over this. I think the biggest advantage of this particular camera is, of course, the 4K at 120 frames per second, and we get a mechanical shutter, which was huge for some people. For me, doing sort of mostly outdoor photography, I couldn't care less about that. It doesn't really make a huge difference for me, but this is such a great camera. We get a better grip, dual SD card slots, and it's just a great camera to shoot with, but it does have some limitations once you start talking about super low light scenarios, which I think this will be fine. You pair this with a fast enough lens, it will most likely deliver the goods. The low light performance on the G9 Mark II is better than when I took my original GH5 Mark II overseas. The dynamic range is better, the sensor's better, the recording modes are better. This could easily be pretty much my everyday carry as well, because there's so many great lenses for this particular system. We'll talk more about lenses in just a moment, but I am still leaning toward bringing the Lumix S9 just based on its physical size. Now let's talk about the camera I plan on bringing anytime I'm doing a talk to camera piece. I'm so on the fence with what to do, and it comes down to mostly the lenses, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I've got the Panasonic S5 Mark IIX, which is arguably my favorite out in the field camera. The image quality on this is really beautiful. There are some limitations with it when it comes to its autofocus in certain modes, but as a whole, this camera is phenomenal, and the end result is absolutely beautiful. I love the look of this sensor. I liked it so much, I sold my Sony FX3 and A7S III. I'm not saying that this is a better camera for those slow motion frame rates whatsoever, but it's a better camera for what I do. I much prefer having open gate and just excellent in-body image stabilization. So for me, this was a no-brainer. And then I got my hands on the GH7. The GH7 has pretty much everything that the S5 Mark IIX has, but without the same sort of compromises. The only compromise, it would be low light performance, but this is still very good. I could use this up to ISO 4000 without any problems. Then that's nowhere near close to sort of what the full frame system can do, but unlike the GH5 Mark II, which kind of capped out at about 1600 in my tests with it, this is so much better now, and the dynamic range is arguably indistinguishable now in the real world eyeball test to the full frame system. So it has so much going for it, and there's no crop. So whether I'm shooting at 4K, 30, 60, or 120 frames per second, there's no additional sensor crops. There's always someone who comments that Micro Four Thirds is already a 2x crop compared to full frame. That might be true if you're comparing the field of view, for example, but what I'm comparing here is if I switch between 4K 30 and 60, there's no change in the width of the image, which is always a good thing. The other reason I'm sort of leaning towards bringing the GH7 is twofold. One, I haven't put this through its paces enough since getting it, and two, it opens up a couple of different lens options. So I have 2 lens options that I'm considering taking with me, and potentially a couple of primes, but we'll talk about that right now. So my favorite travel lens of all time for Micro Four Thirds is the 12 to 35mm f2.8 version 2. I don't have the Leica version. I bought this before my last trip to Hawaii and it performed beautifully. So this is such a great lens, and it'd be great being able to test this on the much newer camera body. There's also another lens I never take with me anywhere because of its size, unless I'm shooting something locally, and that is this guy over here, the 10 to 25mm f1.7. Now this is a big old honkin' lens, but it basically covers everything that I want, from 10mm on the wide end, which is that 20mm field of view, very similar to what this is capable of, all the way to 50mm at 25. So it gives me a very versatile focal length and f1.7 light. When I planned all of this out in my head, I was going to take the Sigma 16mm f1.4, the 12 to 35, and the 9mm f1.7. I thought 3 lenses or 1, and this is actually lighter than the combination of all 3 of those. So I may actually take this with me. I love the fact we get that constant f1.7 aperture, and it's just a really premium lens that I think would be a great test paired with the GH7 for stuff that I choose to shoot with it. And again, this will only be used mostly to address the camera. I'm going to be using the S9, I think, for the, the majority of just the fun travel photography and video work. I have a 7kg weight limit on my bag for a carry-on, and I want to travel as light as I can. You might be thinking, why am I bringing this if I want to travel as light as I can? This makes more sense if I plan on taking more than 2 lenses for Micro Four Thirds. And while this is an expensive lens, I really haven't put it through its paces well enough. I've shot plenty of videos on the channel with it, but I wanted to actually showcase this at some particular point. So if you want to see this lens with the GH7 coming up on the channel, let me know. Or if you're more interested in seeing more full frame content, I'll take the S5 Mark IIX. Anyway, let us know what you think. There's also one other camera I always take with me anytime I travel somewhere fun where I could potentially go underwater or whatever, the GoPro. And this little action camera is the GoPro Hero 10 Black. I've got an 8 and 9 that I purchased over the course of a few years. And last time I traveled to Hawaii, we took 3 of these and we only ever really used 1. So I'm only taking 1 with me this time, and it will be the 10 because it's got arguably the best image quality out of all of them. Now, I don't use these with that super wide fisheye look or anything like that. I shoot in the linear field of view, and it gives me a 16:9 image that I can use interchangeably with the rest of the cameras that I take. So this is a no-brainer. These are so good. The hyperlapse feature is really cool, and the fact you can just throw them around in the water is also really advantageous when you're, again, going swimming or checking out the turtles or whatever. So yeah, this is a definite no-brainer. When it comes to filters, I only plan on bringing 1, and I'll most likely bring this unless I find something else I like better than it before we go. And this is the Hader Pro 2 Variable ND. I'm not a big fan of variable NDs. It's too easy to accidentally have them set too dark, and then you get weird sort of casting on your images. This is pretty good though, but I still prefer like a fixed ND. I think the image quality out of those will be better than any variable ND that I've tried at least. This also has the circular polarizer, which means you can get a lot of color out of the sky. It helps cut through glare on the water and all those kind of things. So it's a pretty much a no-brainer to bring this, especially to somewhere like Hawaii. So this will be the only one that I bring. I'm going to be bringing my Rode Wireless Go 2-pack. This will be my only audio pack, and I've learnt my lesson in the past. I'm always bringing a backup 3.5mm audio cable just in case something breaks. But this is a super light pack, and it has internal recording, which is always a lifesaver just in case something goes wrong. And I'll be bringing my 13.1-inch MacBook Air. This is an M1 and this edits the files fine, so that won't be a problem whatsoever. Everything I bring with me has to fit in a bag that's no heavier than 7 kilograms, which is about 15 pounds or so. So we're going to test this out and see whether or not we can get away with it. So let's do it. GH7, S9, 10 to 25, 20 to 60, Rode Wireless Go 2. This will actually go in my luggage. Filter will also go in my luggage. Spare batteries for GoPro. 2 additional batteries for the main cameras. Computer. Alright, here's the moment of truth, or the moment of reshuffling my camera equipment. So let's give this a go here. Yeah, 5 kilograms on the nose. Right on the nose. So now, what I could potentially do, if I choose to, is bring another lens. Maybe something smaller for Micro Four Thirds, like 12 to 35, which has been my favorite travel lens now for a number of years. This is such a great choice. The 10 to 25 will give me better results than this lens when it comes to flaring and just overall 3D sort of pop. But this is such a great travel lens. It's got optical image stabilization, so this might be the one to bring, or potentially the 9mm f1.7. This is the lens I've wanted to take with me overseas quite a few times. I guess I could just take these two as well, right? Because that kind of covers more ground. These are the decisions I have to make. Or I could always bring kind of like a premium lens for full frame, being the 50mm f1.8. This is my favorite of the S series of primes. It looks so good. It's such a great talk to camera lens. It gives you such a really cool look. But the idea of this trip is to share a little bit about what's going on around and behind me when I'm doing a talk to camera piece, not necessarily blur everything out. So this might actually be overkill because I'll be stopping down to at least f2.8 or maybe even 3.5. The great news is this only weighs 5 kilograms. So if I want to switch out, say, the S5 Mark IIX for the GH7, or not bring an S9 and bring the G9 Mark II, odds are everything's still going to be within the weight requirement, which is awesome. Anyway, let us know what you think. Thanks again for watching. Let us know if you think it's a smart or bad move to bring mismatched sensors sizes with you on a trip, or whether I should bring the G9 Mark II instead of the S9. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll catch you soon. See ya.